There's a study done on death row inmates, people who know with total certainty that they have only 24 hours left to live, and it often reports something unexpected, a deep sense of calm. Not because they've made peace with it, because the uncertainty itself is gone. And that's actually the key to understanding how manifestation really works. It has nothing to do with energy, vibrations, or the universe responding to your requests. It has everything to do with what that uncertainty does to your brain and what happens the moment you remove it. Now I'll share the science behind it. The first thing manifestation does is it calms down your amygdala. If you're not familiar with amygdala, think of it as your brain's alarm system. Its entire job is to constantly scan for danger, and the moment it finds any, it goes off. And the part that matters most is your amygdala isn't actually afraid of bad outcomes, it's afraid of uncertain ones. I'll say that again because it genuinely goes against how most people think about this. Your brain doesn't panic because something bad is guaranteed to happen. It panics because it has no idea what's going to happen. Now think about what that actually implies. Those death row inmates that we were talking about, they aren't facing a good outcome. They're facing probably one of the worst outcomes a human being can face, but they're still calm. And it's because there is nothing left for the amygdala to fight. There's no more what if. The outcome is already logged in, and in a strange, almost unsettling way, that certainty is actually more bearable to the brain than the open-ended agony of simply not knowing. Now flip that around and take it in your own life. For example, think about waiting on a medical test result or the night before a big interview. The bad thing hasn't even happened yet, and it might never even happen, but your amygdala is going off anyways because it doesn't know the outcome yet. And not knowing is exactly what it's wired to treat as a threat. What this reveals is something most people completely miss about why manifestation actually works, because it was never just about attracting good outcomes, it's about removing the uncertainty that keeps your brain sitting in a constant low-grade state of panic. When you manifest something, when you declare this is what's going to happen, you're feeding your amygdala a story of certainty. Is that certainty technically real? Maybe not. Is it an illusion? Maybe yes. But the thing is, your amygdala genuinely cannot tell the difference. You're essentially, in a way, tricking your brain's alarm system into standing down. And once that happens, your stress response, it quiets. Your cortisol, it drops. And you stop operating from survival mode and you actually start being able to work. Now think about how much mental energy it gets wasted constantly second guessing yourself. For example, is this the right path? Or what if it doesn't work out? Should I be doing something else entirely? That is your amygdala repeatedly pulling the fire alarm while you're just trying to get things done. Manifestation done properly is essentially telling that alarm system, we're fine, we already know how this ends, and suddenly you're able to actually focus. The second thing manifestation does is reduce decision fatigue in your prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision making, and long-term thinking. In a way, it's your most advanced mental resource, but it has one major weakness, that it gets tired. Every decision you make, even a tiny one, it costs cognitive energy. Psychologists, they call this decision fatigue, and the more choices you're facing, the faster your prefrontal cortex burns through its reserves. We human beings, we evolved in an environment where choices, they were genuinely scarce. So our brains, they were never designed for a world where you're picking from like a 50-item menu or scrolling through 200 or 300 shows on Netflix, or even having like 10 or 12 different career paths. Now, another way to picture this is, think about your own life and the difference between walking into a coffee shop, already knowing exactly what you want, because in that situation you walk, you order, and you're done. But at the same time, think about another situation, you walk into the same coffee shop, you're standing at the counter, and you're staring at 50 other options. You're thinking whether should I go for oat milk or almond milk, should I go for a hot coffee or an iced coffee, one shot or two shots. It's the same shop, you're the same person, but completely different mental state. And that is exactly what manifestation does for your prefrontal cortex. Once you've already decided that this is the goal, this is the direction that I'm building towards, you've effectively eliminated an entire category of daily decisions. You're no longer spending mental energy every morning asking, is this still the right thing to do? That question for you has already been answered. Your prefrontal cortex is now free to focus entirely on how, not whether. And the real payoff is when you decide in advance exactly what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, you're far more likely to actually follow through. And it's not because you're suddenly more motivated, but because the decision, it has already been made. There's no internal debate left to have. And when the moment actually arrives, your brain doesn't stop to ask, should I? It just acts. And that's what really manifestation is doing under the hood. You're preloading a decision into your brain so it never has to make that decision over and over and over again. The third mechanism is accountability. And this one sits right at the intersection of social psychology and neuroscience, because when you manifest something and you actually say it out loud, whether it's to a friend or a group or an audience, or even just yourself in a journal, you activate something researchers they call identity-based commitment. That goal is now a part of your social identity. And we as human beings, we are wired at a deep neurological level to behave in ways that stay consistent with how they've presented themselves to others. So why that matters is, once you've said something out loud, not following through on it, it starts to genuinely feel wrong. And there is a real discomfort which is almost like a nagging pull that your brain is creating whenever your actions, they stop matching your words. And that discomfort is exactly what pushes you forward. And even if, let's say, you haven't told any single person about it, even if, let's say, it's just a private conversation or a private declaration to yourself, research still shows that it works. Because the private commitment, it activates your own personal sense of integrity. Now you have a version of yourself that made a promise and your brain wants to stay consistent with that version. This is exactly why journaling, vision boards and verbal declarations, they aren't actually pointless. Not because the universe is somehow listening in, but because you are. And your brain, it takes note of that far more seriously than you would ever expect. And now that you understand the mechanism, why certainty calms your brain down enough to actually let things move, the next step is seeing that mechanism applied in a full structured process. That's exactly what the next video covers, Joe Dispenza's complete manifestation framework. I will leave it in the link in the description down below and on your screen, and I'll see you there.